right? I had to find somewhere to be because it was getting exhausting in the resistance. And the place that I
Yeah.
chose to love, it was the most abundant place. Family,
How we doing?
man, deep gratitude, uh, clear gratitude. Best way I can describe it, man, is it just I'm well, and it feels good to be well today.
I like to hear that. I feel the same. Feel the same. And I feel even better to be here with you. So let me do a quick intro to a poet, a scholar, educator, author, MC, uh, husband, angel father. Uh, man, anything else? Anything I missed?
I can't name it that you missed it. I'm present. Feel good. Yeah, no, you named them. You named them.
So, yeah, so I want to dig into it. Look, there's a lot I want to dig into with you. There's a lot that I feel like you can share, especially just with your background, with your affirmations. And that's one main thing I did want to speak to was Soul Affirmations, which is a book of yours. And word out on the street is you have an audio version of
Yeah,
Soul Affirmations, SOL
yeah,
Affirmations.
yeah.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
Um, yes, I can. Just grateful to be here. Soul affirmations. I was just talking to Felicia before we got on, just about I often ask myself. I make sure I ask out loud, what brings me here? What brings me to the space? All right, why am I taking this call? Because one, it's a new cadence for me, right?
Sure.
These new cadence, and we just confirm that we come for reference, right? To leave reference for anybody who may have experienced something similar or is just working through, loss in that way or grief. So the project is reference, right? It's our attempt to leave reference for someone in a world to come or in a world before us that these types of experiences have happened. Here's a path that we have taken. It's just evidence that someone was here, right? So the audio happened, the album happened because I just understood the increasing inhibitors that interfere with people's ability to be present with themselves. And
Sure.
sometimes the task of opening a book, some folks may not have time for that the way they want to. So the audio was an adapted version to make sure that we can all love more abundantly.
I love that. I love that. And I also love that phrase, to love more abundantly. And that's something you've put out
Mhm.
into your social space, I'm sure with everyone you interact with, about loving more abundantly. And I think through that, something that I wanted to bring up, with this month's series of Man to Man was honing in on how we can love ourselves as men within a mental space. So, I think there's something else you mentioned, but it's basically to the sense of healthy habits of the mind is something that you look to do. And I think that's just the same with as we train our bodies, as we feed our bodies, as we feed our soul. I think mentally, that's just one of those connectors that, I mean,
Yeah.
what's up here is what's projected out here and perceived as our experience, as our being, as myself, as Karega, as David. So I'm a big fan of being able to fine tune this up here. And I think something through affirmation, something through being able to speak certain words, not to go biblical, but speaking things into existence. There's a reference I used to hear from my mom growing up where she would always talk about being able to speak things into existence. And I think that that's a big part of the affirmations, where for a self as a man, that's why I love, through your book, through the audio now, through your music, even when you performed at the Black Love Summit with us, these words, these lyrics, they, I mean, for myself, they're fulfilling. And I think as human beings, but more so, you know, when it comes to being men, I mean, man, women, whatever the case may be, but for men in particular, you know, I've been raised. I want to ask you about your background before getting to the point you're at right now that we know and love Karega Bailey as today. Like, how were you before that? Like, what got you into this space of saying, okay, this is the thing that I need to start doing to self improve up here mentally?
David, you asking the ill questions. Um, I where I stand today was never my plan to stand. It was never the intersections that I've seen in life weren't by choice, right? They were by circumstance of the lived experiences that largely come with um, Black manhood, but also just parenthood. So
Sure.
my losses, the pains, the deep waters, um, some of the unresolved brought me to this place where I was looking for reprieve, maybe something that I could have agency over, right? And the
Hmm.
variable that made the most sense, the most salient variable to focus in on was love. Um, I've had a lot of experiences with life and force and fight and resistance and um, making room for the margins.
Yeah.
But love was the greatest salient variable to point me to alleviating the conditions that were causing the suffering. Right? I think of love like so my arrival at love was through great fight, right? So I experienced the loss of my brother uh, to gun violence in 2014, and it's unique. I was recording an album called Peace King at that time, and it was
Okay.
all affirming the Black identity, all around raising the collective consciousness, and how deeply conflicted I felt that I was authoring a body of work called Peace King, but I had just had to experience what it was for a Black man to take my brother's life. And the question that developed in me was, am I capable of still continuing this message? With the harm that I've experienced and now the way that I am interacting with the pain, the ideas of retaliation, what does it mean
Yeah.
to be his brother? What does it mean to keep my family safe? Is somebody going to try us next? Do we need to make a statement? All these things start to operate on how to provide safety for my immediate loved ones.
Yeah.
And that struggle, that day after day, year-end struggle, um, like Dr. West says, there's no affirmation and negation, right? So the fight in my resistance, like resistance isn't a way of being, right? I had to find somewhere to be because it was getting exhausting in the resistance. And the place that I
Yeah.
chose to love was the most abundant place.
No, it's beautiful. I mean, look, at the end of the day, you know, personally, I feel like that's where it comes. That's where it all stems from is love. No matter what your belief system or lack thereof, I think at the end of it all,
Yeah.
that's the ultimate destination, love and surrendering to love. And I love the word surrender because at once I feel like it's difficult for us in general, and then for us as Black men even more so, to come to terms with that word. I think, you know, once you say surrender for men, like if you would have told 20-year-old David surrender to something, having grown up in New York City and seen some of the things I've seen, and Lord knows some of the things you've experienced and seen, that would just hit different. It's like, what am I surrendering to? I'm a man, you know, I'm a man, quote unquote. But now, you know, having these experiences, getting yourself to a point of love and understanding the dynamics of it. And now when I say surrender, you know, you smile because because it hits different, because
Oh,
there's a maturation, there's an appreciation.
yeah,
So
yeah.
and I feel that, and that's why I feel, I've even joked with you in a couple conversations I was fortunate to have with you, even on a business level, like just feeling the energy from you virtually.
Yeah,
I can just pick up on it. And
yeah.
so I think, that maturation from those experiences, like you said, sometimes you have to go into the dark before you see the light, before you see those stars shining above you.
Some,
Um,
sometimes you have to go in the dark when your assignment is the light, right? Sometimes it's about going to the margins, some of the
yeah,
more invisibilized places, and definitely some of the more invisibilized parts of Black male identity. The whole construct that we don't have all the feelings, all the psyche, all the emotions that any human being has, right? That
right,
that construct is a pseudoscience that was meant to keep us in the suffering, right? So when we, so sometimes the light isn't so far of the places where you think light is. Sometimes the light's work is to go where the light isn't, but because light is there, right? It's like
right.
imagine being in a cave. I smiled about surrender, but we're gonna go back to imagine being in a cave. I smiled
Sure.
about surrender because that was the name. That was the name of my first publication, right?
Ah,
It was the first album and first book, and it was all about um, this idea that we sometimes say, "Not me, not now, not yet," right? But the
yeah,
greatest surrendering is like it's an invitation to something else. So with that being said, like the light's assignment sometimes will go to these other spaces because light is there, right? If you were in a cave and you once came from the light, you remember the light times, but you've been in that cave so long, but you see somebody come in and you can tell they still have the light on them, right? This is
yeah,
the story of
yeah,
David in the Cave of Adullam that I talk about in Alive, insofar as like there's just a greater responsibility, uh, because the way love liberates, you just tap the candle, just tap the candle, right? And essentially, and then we'll light the path for generations to come. Like that's the greater work. It's not even about now; it's about the generations to come. So, what light do we leave here?
yeah. That's it's beautiful. It's beautiful because ultimately, and I think that's, just touching on this mental wellness for a moment. I think you just touched on the greater, the greater purpose, the bigger purpose. So in getting ourselves in tune up here allows us to be able to get in tune and in connection with our family, community, the world, and be able to take that, source it from up here and in here, and be able to source that out, um, and be able to affect and make those changes. So I think in that, in feeling this greater purpose, that already helps up here. And I feel like with you and some of the journey that I know of, with your brother, with Kamayu. And by the way, happy birthday in advance, because I know you're on the eve of that new year
Yeah,
for you. So bliss and blessings to you, brother. And
big.
I also know it also marks an anniversary of you being notified by your wife
Yep,
that you
yep.
were about to be a father as well. So I know that hinges on, like I said, this bigger purpose. So if you can just speak to a little bit more, just what that greater purpose feels like to you in terms of your mental space, and just that feeling, going back to this, healthy habits of the mind. I feel like this greater feeling of purpose adds to that.
I'm taking notes. What's profound to me is we can discuss purpose in this unique way that I can accept and acknowledge, but that wasn't the sequence, the pathway that I got here,
Sure,
right?
sure.
In in the pain, in the loss, it makes no sense, right? I, Felicia and I still not have arrived at the greater purpose of all this, right? But what happens is when we acknowledged that we would participate in the telling of our story to create reference for others, I found new pathways, new doors, new reasons to get up out the bed. I found new reasons each day. And those reasons began to highlight and kind of point to, oh, a purpose, but never making sense of purpose of why we're here. It's just the agreement that we have that we would be referenced. Felicia and I had a conversation just yesterday. And we were trying to understand, how did we come here again? And she talked that she didn't even, her immediate words were, nothing can come from this. Right? She said, there's nothing that can come from this. There's not an enlightenment. There's not a blessing. There's not a reason. Nothing can come from this. And I talked about the day she said that, I had already looked myself in the mirror. So as the husband, as my wife was giving birth and she laid straight, right? I was standing. So when we experienced the double transition of our daughter, my wife had already endured labor and surgery, right? Mm-hmm. But I had already begun to look myself in the mirror and ask, what from here? I was already on my feet. And it blew my mind that I didn't pass out. It blew my mind that I didn't lose my mind or begin to punch walls, or I couldn't freak reality. I couldn't take an alternate dimension. It wasn't a dream. I was sober and present, trying to figure out what from here. So my questions began early and differently. Mm-hmm. Life says nothing can come from this. And I'm asking myself, what from here? My first job is to adhere to being her help. That is my first job. I am first in command in helping. I'm her helpmate. She said that after she sat with her grief to be one, then she looked up for reference, like, who else has been here? So it wasn't until she looked up for reference to figure out, has anybody else been here, that she understood that, oh, there may be a need of speaking our story for someone else who may be looking. So that's how we even get here. That's how we get Black love. That's how we get to these conversations. It wasn't beeline to go tell our story. It wasn't that, because the brokenness and the despair, it leaves you almost nothing to say. What is there to say? But you learn your voice, you learn your reason, and in this stride and in these habits of mind, you can come across a purpose so great, where now I understand that all of these things have been invitations to love more abundantly. I talk about to take inventory over the things occupying love's territory, right? And praying for the courage and discipline to let them go. What happens is my despair was so great, I needed love so vast, and I had to start finding things that I can get rid of, throwing overboard, to let more love in, because that was the only thing that was going to help me where I was. But that's how I began to even do this work and seek love.
So, so with that, I mean, where you're at now today then, and moving forward. So now with these channels and with you feeling like you've invited more love, you've taken in more love. And again, this is by no means, okay, we're done, box checked. This is a lifelong journey. This is...
Good.
So yeah, so where, where now, so the things you're doing now and on a daily basis. So I always like to ask and kind of tune in to those that I feel like are radiating and projecting as you are in a positive, uplifting, meaningful way for yourself, for others. What are you doing on a daily basis? Whether it's the affirmations, I'm sure the affirmations are part of it, but what do you feel you do on a daily basis that again brings you back to these healthy habits of the mind, um, and healthy habits in particular? But I feel like it always starts up here and
Yeah,
ends up here.
yeah, totally. Um, there are things that do happen daily. There are things that happen regularly, right? There are things that happen naturally. But some of the daily practices include um, I like to read, run, and write, or I like to read and ride, right? Some days, run these Oakland hills that could be heavy on your knees. So some days I bike. Um, but the reading is just about that silent conversation with my mind. Um, my prayer is a part of my everyday. That's the natural for me that happens. Um, I once spoke about a period of my life recently where I purposely sat my phone at the same distance away that I sat my Bible so that I would wake up and make a choice. I was training myself to make the choice because without the opportunity for choice behavior, I would be only who I was by habit. So I started training myself to make a choice. So pray, read, um, run, write. The running, the movement is just good for me because I realize there is there's a oneness with the elements outside. But there's also something that breath does. That movement is medicine, I find, in a way, especially for a grieving body, right? When
Sure.
you're in deep grief, movement is critically important. Um, so that substitutes and that justifies, why I ride or why I write or why I go to the pull up bars, wherever I can get the body moving, right?
Yeah.
Make room to ask myself questions or to leave record of what I might be thinking because it could very well come back and be reference for something that I am yet to experience. Soul affirmations actually happens that way. It wasn't written in response to what I went through. It was written before I went through what I went through. And I was so damn upset when a friend brought a copy to the hospital because I wasn't ready to confront any of those values. What in would be reference for where I'm at? And I opened it and I could not believe the truth I found. And I even my photographer actually takes a photo of this page that I was on, and it silenced me for days.
Do you remember which affirmation it was?
Um, uh, I do, but I want to find it, so I say it.
Okay.
Um, Today I acknowledge the gift of impermanence. The struggle nor ease will last forever, so I learn to have respect for them both. I didn't like that. I did not like that. I did not like that. I wasn't writing it for reference of where I was at, and I could not believe what I found when I went. The
Sure.
album that folks are listening to, we were pregnant with Kamayu when we recorded it. All those vocals, Kamayu is in Felicia's womb.
Wow.
I couldn't believe we had that record keeping in such a way to come back to. But I was so glad that we began to document and iterate, right? And creating it because it was originally a tool for the work I was doing in culture in schools, right? I needed to create a text that families and students could agree to engage in so they could be familiar with the language that I would be using as I redirect unfavorable behavior or help guide the emotional course.
Sure.
And the audio was an adaptation for students who may have trouble accessing the text. So I couldn't believe that thinking it in an inclusive way like that really ended up including us. And then look at large.
So, well, I want to share one. There's one I have to get it officially, but you do have the handle at SOL Affirmations, and there's one I picked up and I saved it into my IG.
Fresh.
And this one that I love is: today I am in spirit of abundance. In this space, I am incapable of holding on to a single worry.
Ooh, you kicking game. You kicking game right now.
You kicked it first. I just accepted that. And I said that right there, because that's beautiful on a surface level, but that's loaded with a lot in there that you can start to pull from, because it's going back to some of the things you were talking about, where this spirit of acceptance and being able to grow, where you said incapable of holding on to a single worry. I mean, that hits me every time I say it aloud, and that's why that's one of mine that I saved.
Wow.
Because it's beautiful in that, where you can, like again, like you've done, is you have to go through certain experiences, and in that moment you don't always know what the why. You don't know the what, the why, and then you don't always know the how and the outcome of that. But as you go through it, and as you begin to realize, and when you can put your mindset there to not realize that, no, I mean, again, getting to the point of being incapable, but realizing you don't have to hold on to a single worry, that I can get into this space. And again, for me, abundance comes from love, because when you have love, you have abundance of everything.
It's the most pervasive force in all of design. Love is the most amazing force. And I choose to align myself with it, right? Because I've been in other battles and I've tried other armor, and nothing was quite as, maneuverable and enduring as love. Nothing. And it's a trip too, because like there's so many designs of words that deviate us from love, especially in the Black male experience.
Yeah.
So much design words, there's so much propaganda, there's so much marketing, there's so much things that direct us away from love, when truly that is what the human being is reaching for, right? It's the course of human evolution, and we are full human beings, right? When you talk about the affirmations, it's when we are, so let's say you're producing a show, something, you're working on an objective. And I don't know how many of the viewers out there have also experienced this, but you're working on a goal and you may forget to eat. Now, what blows my mind in that is that we know that we actually eat for sustenance. It's part of how, right? Whether it's Maslow's hierarchy, however you design it, we need to eat.
Yeah.
So how is it that we forget to do something that we know is essential to our survival? Well, what happens is it must mean that our minds are preoccupied on something else. So how much more could we forget when we are afraid, when we are frightened, when we are in trauma, when we are in grief? So we can forget things that are essential. And you train yourself to remember the things that are needed, because affirmations aren't new things. They're things that are already true. They were already true. And you train to be able to find those affirmations, find those virtues and those values that help you when you are seeing something that tells you otherwise, right? You have to kind of be able to decode the reality to remember what you stand on. Someone asked me, now that you hit rock bottom, like how did you rise from rock bottom? Or that was along the question. And I just framed it that, well, I choose to acknowledge that I found the rock, as in the solid ground, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
to get to the bottom, to get to solid ground, well, it's only up from here. But at least I know I'm standing on solid ground. That is my faith. That is my practice. That is my relationship. That is how I've seen God show up for me. Now I'm not going off of what someone told me, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
going on solid ground. So you just got to reframe. You got to reframe your reality with words, right? You have to
Yeah.
point, because someone is going to tell you a reality about yourself that otherwise may not be true, or affirming or leading you in the direction, right, of of the openness of being broken, right? You're not
Right.
just only you're not just broken, you can also be broken open. I'm in the open space right now. I'm in the open. I can feel, I can hear, I can receive, I can love. I know where to dispatch love. I know that it belongs in the margins. I know that there's
Mm-hmm.
light margins, and we have to, it's love's responsibility to make love present in those margins, because there's light in the margins. There's full human beings capable of all the complexities of life, but they're giving a limited set of experiences by design. There's no
Right.
question, right? So if they're designing a reality that is that monetizes off of our suffering, then we must design a reality that liberates us from those conditions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I, man,
Bruh, but you also, okay, so watch, when you asked me what things happen daily, and I said there's things that happen regularly.
yeah.
Things are good, all these virtues are good, but I also regularly participate in therapy, right? It's regular for me.
Sure.
It's not negotiable, it's flexible, but it's regular, right? And I like that I come to that space because I can hear myself differently. I can hear my wife differently. She can hear me differently. She can hear herself. When we have this conversation with our therapist, it's different from our normal cadence of conversation, where we love talking to one another and we laugh about it, and we have this rhythm and interjection system that works for us.
Right.
But in therapy, we do deeper listening to one another.
Mm.
That I can hear the value and the virtue of what my wife is saying, so that I can better show up for her, to affirm her with truth that I already heard her say about herself, right? So I'll only take the truth that you affirm about yourself to hold and lift you up, because you know the way. It's just hard to find this footing, right?
Right.
So
Right.
it's something that we do regularly, in addition to exercise and reading and writing and nutrition and green things. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
therapy isn't like a negotiable. I love how in the shelter in place, my family has seen us do therapy, right?
Mm.
And the ill part is we don't know nothing about that. That's not something we talked about or seen in practice. I got a 7-year-old nephew, close to me as ever. And one time he came in the living room while Felicia and I were having therapy at my brother's house.
Okay.
And my brother calls him out the way. But I understand giving us privacy, but I can read his body language
Sure.
that therapy and you shouldn't be here. And I went to my big brother after. He loves me. I love him. And I told him it was okay for my nephew to see us in therapy, right? And I said, I just want to prepare him for a world where Black men get to seek help. I said, because right now it's his auntie and his uncle. We're the highest functioning. We're the apple of his eye. He loves us.
Mm.
So if he sees healthy people go to therapy, how
Right.
important is that for him? Because now the stigma, the stigma is removed. He's seeing healthy
Exactly.
therapy. And I want him to know that he has the world he inherits also gets to include that value. Because my family did not know how to talk about it or how to use it, right? It was always a representation of the system and impeding on privacy with
Right.
outcomes that can be rendered unfavorable,
Right. Right.
right? But now my nephew was like, oh, therapy. And they me up and we go chill. We go, shoot some hoops in the front of the house. Like, he sees me well with it. And that was important for my nephew to see.
That's beautiful. because I feel like that's something more and more, thankfully, more and more with these type of conversations, and just more, there are more and more spaces and more opportunities to let this message be heard, because you know, they only learn by what we do. They only look up to us, you know, the older folks, the ones that are held at the most high. They're like, what are you doing so I can be that way? So you lead by example, and it's always by your actions. It's not what you say, but it's what you do. And in this case, I mean, that's beautiful for a 7-year-old young Black boy to be able to see you in therapy and know that it's cool, know that it's okay,
Yep.
know that it's not this mystical whatever, or that you're breaking from, you know, I know, you know, the soul of Black folk always, you know, comes back to religion on some, at some level. And it always seems like this friction. Well, you can't be in therapy because that means something's really wrong with you, and you just need the word and you'll find it there and it's okay. And again, no judgment. But I feel with the journey that has been experienced in this country,
Yeah.
to see everybody else need some sort of help, but we almost take this, that there's almost this pride of not needing help and keeping this hard shell. But you got to break that open. Like we all can use some help. We all can use some expansion. And even yourself, I mean, you from what I see, you have this beautiful relationship with your wife, but you already pointed out you listen more intently when you're in therapy. You're able to hear, and you're able to reach these, like this energy and these frequencies that you're not going to hear and feel and vibe on, and be able to react with her in a different space. Because at home, I'm sure you're in your rhythm, and you have this rhythm. You go there, and things open up. So you're allowed therapy. You're allowed God. God provides those channels if you want to go there.
I'll tell you how I know God provides those channels. Our
Please.
church for our therapy. Our church was the first agency, the Way Church Berkeley. Shout out.
Shout out. That's
Listen,
dope.
Pastor Mike came to the hospital. Felicia had questions. She is a praying woman. She's had faith. Y'all heard the story on Black Love. I couldn't even date her because I had to go see her at church. And I was like, listen, might have to just, I don't know how to do it. But check. So she's had her faith. She has her relationship with God, but she had questions. She was angry, rightfully angry. Our pastor came and said, God is not intimidated by her questions, right? God is not intimidated by her questions. Let them be. Do you know how empowering that was for me as a husband, a man of faith, who had already been asking myself questions, to hear this? All the adults in the room, the mothers, no one objected it. When Felicia was given that permission to have her own questions, it taught me how to better support her. She let me pray for her. She saw my rhythm. She saw how I would get up and be by her bedside, waiting for her to get. I didn't want to leave because I wanted to see how her day started, so I can gauge what type of emotional support she was going to need. It's all written in the morning. If you can see that, so I'll make sure I was there for that day in, day out. But our church put us in therapy. And the ill part about that was it was totally acknowledged that there's so much work that has to be done, right? This idea of it being scheduled on some other schedule, some religious schedule, that's not the way grief works, right? Grief don't adhere to nobody's schedule. Right. It schedules, it wrecks calendars, it wrecks our orientation of reality, right? Like it's my birthday tomorrow, but in my mind, I know that the Bryant family and the families aboard that flight are reconciling what it means to come across the 1-year anniversary. Because when you're 1 year, that 365 days of that same thing, damn, it is hurtful. It's deeply hurtful to know that the world has gone on in such a way where you can see people pick up their lives and keep moving on, and you're still here trying to resolve, wow, a year already?
Right.
So all these things that are happening, and just being able to come in and have a space of reference and to emote. I write to emote, to express these things. Like you said, my nephew, it creating cool for him that healthy people and cool people go to therapy. Our church was so forward thinking in that, right? So
Yeah.
forward. They responded faster than the state. They responded faster than our insurance.
That's amazing.
It was
That's
done.
amazing.
It was done. So that's a huge part in terms of how I was able to even engage my mental health, and still have room to develop my faith, but question my faith, but also do a lot of protecting of my wife, for all the people who, who believe they hear from God in messaging.
Sure,
And
sure.
we were well informed that their relationship is working fine. And if she's comfortable with waiting on him, then I'm comfortable with waiting on him. And I'm comfortable in standing in her side and doing what it takes while she waits. My job is to be the faith activated, to walk it out so she can see love, so she can see that grace, so she can see it every day, so she knows that it's real in some way, right? If not in all the other ways she desires, it will at least be real in the way her husband responds to her, real in the way her husband regards her. I can at least do that for my faith on behalf of the kingdom. I can at least represent what love and grace and servitude looks like for my wife. So there'll be no question there. Because she's going to have a bunch of other questions. But let me not have to develop this as a question. Because I've also seen these types of losses impact relationships, impact marriages, right? It's hard
Absolutely.
to reconfigure. So this was just, I'm just heeding, listening, open, surrendering, right? It's the surrender. It's the great strength that I am coming into. I'm Kamayu's father. I have a child. She came to us in this world. Right? She came. And we experienced a double transition. So now as January 26 approaches, I ask myself, what does it mean to be her father in this world? Who would she be proud of? How do I show up for her mom? And all the other little black girls, black women, all women, black men, how do I show up for the boys that are going to be her classmates? How do I show up for the little girls and not just create this fantasy around the women in my life, but disregard the women of the world? They're all one. So I ask myself, who am I? Ask her daddy, is she proud of me? How am I showing up? Right? Am I 10 toes tapping? Am I standing on my word? Am I doing for her mother what I said I would do on the day that I asked her to be my bride? Am I honoring my daughter? Do I speak of her? Do I let the world know how she moves through me? On what she's done on the heart of this man? She made room so we may all love more abundantly. And this is the work that God calls me to. So will I make her proud? That's my question I ask myself. So, the birthday tomorrow.
Well, I'm going to answer that question for you. Yes. Because, brother, you're making me proud. And I'm not afraid to say this either, because more men need to say what I'm about to say. I love you. I appreciate you. And I appreciate you more than anything for sharing and continuing to share that story of your journey. And again, the story's not over because your journey's not over. And there's so much that you're doing. There's so much that you continue to do. And there's so many people you are impacting positively from this. And again, to be able to just allow this conversation and allow this space for this conversation is something beautiful, and something that I really hope this conversation, this dialogue, your continued dialogues, the dialogues that you have with Felicia on your weekly, on your own, through your soul affirmations, audio, book, your music, your education. Keep going, keep thriving. I'm gonna keep feeling it. I'm gonna keep sharing it, and I want you to keep doing the same. I love this. You hit a nerve, a good one, a good one that I hope everybody listening and watching this feels the same as I do, because I'm moved, and Whew, yeah, I need to sit with this for a moment. But that these are all beautiful emotions that I'm feeling.
Man, David, I want to thank you for the courage to speak in that way. And I've also had to do work to learn how to sit with compliments, because I learned that if you listen deeply enough, you can deposit them for a day you might need them. But I went through a period, right, of great question, great doubt, asking myself what is true. And when brothers speak to me like this, I deposit that. I love it. I deeply appreciate this type of space. I deeply appreciate this, the work we're doing to tell our own stories and shift narratives.
Yeah,
The thing that I really want to acknowledge is that this is also Black manhood. And my deep desire is to make sure that we see all of us as full human beings, not just the ones who show up to spaces like these, not just the ones who vocabulary I have to talk about emotional spaces, right? I want to go
sure.
every corner that Black life exists and create the conditions that allow us to alleviate our suffering. Let brothers tell their own story. Let brothers reconcile. Let them say how they feel, right? Because there's power in that. And
Absolutely.
what I'm learning now is that, like, that's what this work is, right? This work is telling these stories to create the conditions that allow us to alleviate our own suffering. You said the conversation continues. Tomorrow, I release Prayers of an Angel Father. It is a new creative endeavor that starts to get into some of the nuances of my manhood in this, because respectfully, my wife comes first, right? But
Hmm.
she is empowering me to tell my story and talk about what it's been in Black masculinity and the deep grief that I've seen. So tomorrow we premiere Prayers of an Angel Father. The information will go up on the page, but it'll be on the YouTube for sure, right?
Okay.
To come, because I want brothers here, room being made. So that's happening. Yeah,
Can you share the YouTube destination where people
yeah,
can find it?
yeah. It's the YouTube, the backslash. I guess I type it. Soul and Love. SOL, like soul.
Yep.
Soul Love. Soul and Love is our YouTube page. Um, Speaking of Soul and Love, can I share something with you guys from this really quickly?
Absolutely. From Soul Affirmations, let's do it.
Life is not just something happening around me. Life is something happening inside of me. And today, I will take time to explore what that means. I'll say that again. Life is not just something happening around me. Life is something happening inside of me. And today, I will take time to explore what that means. In the
It's
mar-
beautiful.
in the margins, life is often seen as circumstances happening to us. Right? But when we give ourselves permission to know that life is not just what's happening around us, it's not just the news, it's not just the headlines, the tabloids, or those things that control your emotional current, but it's also something happening deep inside of you. When you take time to explore that, there's so much there. And every Black man deserves to explore that. Because Dave Chappelle said, listen, he said, I did something that a lot of brothers don't have the time or resources to do. I thought about how I felt. Like, the comedy, but the profundity in that is so true.
Yeah.
So we deserve to think about how we feel and express that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's a beautiful way to wrap right now. I can continue this conversation. I can continue to feel all the feels right now and just exchange this beautiful energy. Uh, and we're going to do it again. But right
Yeah.
now, I'll wrap it at this. What I also want to do, because I'm sure I'm going to get asked this a lot, where can we purchase and find Soul Affirmations, SOL Affirmations, the book and the audio?
The book, all you have to do, it's in the link in my bio on my
Okay.
Soul Affirmations. It's there, but you experience Soul Affirmations through our Bandcamp, but anybody can visit soulandlove.com, soulandlove.com, and it's also available on the website, soulandlove.com, and it's going to take you to a portal where you can see all of our music, more books, right? But you go to soulandlove.com. The album, the deluxe album, is available on all your streaming platforms, wherever you get your music, whether it's Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, wherever you go, it's there. You can find both Soul Affirmations, the book, at soulandlove.com. Yeah, and there's so much more music there too.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, Karega, this was soul enriching, and I feel like we just went from man to man to soul, and I'm proud to say that, and I want to continue this more, and we will. But until then, I will wrap up, and again, left this on a high note. Much love to you again. So much appreciation for you having this conversation, and look forward to more of it with you in the future.
Thank you so much, man. Massive love to you, my brother, all the people who lend you to this work, your family, whoever let you do this. Thank them for letting you come to this space. I honor Felicia. I honor my family that lets me come to this work. May we all love more abundantly.
All right.